So I've been asked a lot recently in comments and questions whether I use permanent hair colour to tone, and the answer is always going to be no. Keep on watching if you'd like to find out why I'm waffling and I have no idea what I'm meant to be saying. Hello and welcome to the world of Craig. Yes, that's me, I'm Craig, and this is my channel where we get into all things hair and sometimes a little bit of beauty. If you haven't seen the last couple of videos, yes, I've bleached my hair. It's officially, allegedly summer here in London, so out have come the bright coloured clothes. I always think it's a bit of a cliche that hairdressers just always wear black, but that's just my own personal thoughts and feelings. So, I love my social media platforms, digital platforms, that's the one, because I can react to all of my fantastic subscribers and followers and answer your questions. I am here to share what I know with you so that everybody, whether you be a hair pro or a consumer at home, can have the best hair, or you can give your clients the best hair. So I've been getting asked a lot recently whether I use permanent hair colour to tone, and I don't. I never ever do. There's a couple of exceptions, but very, very small exceptions, which we'll get into later on. But that's what this video is, and it's going to be, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, he says. I'm being advantageous. But basically, in this video, it's my thoughts and feelings and why I never use permanent colour. But that's a long enough intro, so let's get into it. Now, before we get into the video, very briefly, if you enjoy this video, and if you're watching along and you think that's very helpful, or I just enjoyed it, or I'd like to see more of his content, then obviously you can subscribe and hit the bell so that you see that everything that's coming up here on my channel. And I also have an Instagram, which is on screen now, which is not the world of Craig, it's Craig's World of Hair. There you go, bit of housekeeping. So first of all, I just very briefly, if I think of these videos being accessible for everybody and having information for everyone. So if you're not a hairdresser, or if you're somebody from up above that lives on the moon that's watching this, then I want to explain the three different types of hair colour very, very briefly. First up, we have permanent colour, which is what this video is all about. When you mix up permanent colour, it's normally a cream. There are other sorts, but basically, generally, I'm generalising, it's a cream, and you mix it with a peroxide, and that creates a chemical reaction, and that releases energy. That's an oxidative dye, and that's basically how the dye stuff is released into the hair. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to keep this moving along. Number two, we have demi-permanent colours. And these are still using a catalyst. They are some kind of liquid demi, cream, gloss, and then you mix them with a developer, a more gentle developer, and that's basically what causes a chemical reaction, and they deposit in the hair and sometimes on the outside of the hair. There's less energy, but there is still a chemical reaction going on. So that's demi-permanent colours. Then we have semi-permanent colours, which are wash-out colours, which basically sit on the surface of the hair. There are exceptions if the hair is porous, if it's very fragile, if the cuticle is very raised. Cuticles are not like doors, they don't open and close, but they are a bit like fish scales, if you like, or like the thongs of a pine cone that basically they lift up very slightly, and then sometimes semi-permanent colours can get into the hair and leave a stain. So, just so that if you've never heard of hair colour before, and so that we're very clear, we have permanent colour where the most energy, this is important, listen to this bit, we have permanent colour where the most energy happens, if you like, the biggest chemical reaction. We have demi-permanent colours where there is less of a reaction, but there is still an oxidative deposit going on, lots of information in a very short space of time. And number three, we have semi-colours which sit on the surface of the hair. Okay, now we've got that out of the way, let's get into the science of permanent colour very quickly. Now let's get into how permanent hair colour works. Most permanent hair colours contain ammonia. Now, some of them are ammonia free, but they will still contain something that has the energy, you see, I was talking about energy, that has something that can cause a chemical reaction within the hair so that the cuticle of the hair can lift, if you like, can raise, and then that can let the pigment into the cortex of the hair, which is kind of the deepest part of the hair, if you like. It's the bit of the hair where the colour is deposited. So, whether they contain ammonia or not, there's still that exchange of energy, okay? And that's effectively what permanent hair colour does. And that chemical reaction changes the pH in the hair, so it's more alkaline, because you're mixing that product with a peroxide, which causes that chemical reaction to take place, and that oxidization process where it uses oxygen from the air to deposit the pigment in the hair, creating A, a chemical reaction, B, an alkaline environment, okay, and that's important because we'll get onto that in a second. So that's exactly how permanent colour works. Right, now let's get on to why I don't use it to tone hair. Okay, so it's worth adding at this point that this video, using permanent hair colour to tone hair, is really about toning global lightness, so a global bleach out, like what I have right now, or partial lightening, so balayage, highlights, you know, a bold stripe or anything like that. It's about those two kinds of things. And that's really the main two things that you would tone. I know sometimes you would refresh mid-lengths and ends of a tint, but I also wouldn't use permanent colour for that. And this is why. If you have lifted the hair to the correct level, which is what I am really an advocate for, there are many videos here on my channel that are all about lifting, and it is the crux of what I do and the sort of aesthetic of the colour that I like. If you have lifted the hair correctly, you don't need the energy of a permanent colour. So yes, some demi-permanent colours do contain a bit of ammonia, but they don't contain enough, along with the developer, the catalyst, which we've talked about, which is what releases the energy. You don't need so much energy because all you're doing is depositing tone. I hope that makes sense. You'll have to let me know in the comments if it does. So really, you know, if you're going to use and this is where things get not complicated, but they can get complicated for people using permanent colour. For example, if you use a permanent colour on hair that's already very porous, and even if you're using it with a very gentle developer, so say 10 volume or a pastel developer like some of the permanent colours have, there's still a lot of ammonia in that permanent cream colour. So even though it's a lower volume of developer, there's going to be a bigger exchange of energy than if you used a demi-permanent colour. Now, I hear a lot that, well, it's a permanent colour, so it's going to make the colour last longer. No, that's not really the case. If you use a permanent colour with a lower developer to tone on hair that's porous, you may make the hair more porous because there's more energy. I really hope that comes across in this video. It's all about energy. It's all about energy. So therefore you make the hair more porous, so then the toner fades quicker, so then you tone it again with a permanent colour, and then the hair gets more porous. It could be that the hair is very porous, so you tone it, and it grabs that permanent colour really quickly. Permanent colour, the molecules, the colour, the actual pigment molecules are smaller than a demi-permanent colour because they are supposed to go into the cortex of the hair. So it might grab on the hair very fiercely, and it might stain the hair, and then it won't fade, and then you won't be able to get rid of it. So those are two of the things that I think are really important to think about. But also, and this is a really huge thing I think, if you're toning partial highlights, balayage, and someone has their natural colour and then some hair that's been lifted, if you use a permanent colour and your developer that you're mixing it with is slightly higher, higher than it needs to be, and there's slightly more energy, there we go again, then you might shift your natural base or your client's natural base. So that means that there's enough ammonia and enough peroxide, enough energy in that product to tone the highlights, yes, but you're also going to shift their base a little bit. And that means that, after a while, they're going to get a regrowth because their natural colour has been lifted by the ammonia in the permanent colour. So that's a clip with a lot of information in, but that's the crux of why I don't use permanent colour to tone. And just to reiterate it again very quickly before we move on to a couple of exceptions, as I mentioned in that clip, it is all about, for me, how you lift the hair. I also feel that if you use a permanent colour to tone the hair when it's not light enough, you're going to get a very deposited, what can look quite muddy and quite, just not very aesthetically pleasing, which is why I always say if the hair is not compromised, if you can lift it to the level that you want it to lift to get the best result, of which there are many, many, many videos here on my channel. There's a hair color theory playlist, there are my toning videos as well, which are all in a playlist. If you lift the hair to the right level, then toning with a demi-permanent color, of which there are many, and all the colour houses have them. Sharp intake of breath, getting very excited. All the colour houses have them, and the formulations are so brilliant. And yes, I use a lot of Shades of Q gloss, but I have tried the ones from Pravana. I use a lot of Colour Touch as well by Wella. I have used Shinefinity. There are loads of them, loads of brilliant formulas. My channel is non-brand specific. It just so happens that I use a lot of Shades of Q gloss because that's what we stock in the salon, and I love the product. So there's a lot of great products. So yes, in a nutshell, make sure you lift the hair light enough for the result that you want, is what I'm trying to say. Now, there are a couple of things that are worth mentioning before I say goodbye, and that is, I see a lot of people using T18, Wella T18. We don't have that over here in the UK, but I know it's huge in America and has been for a long time. I have used it before. It is a great product. It is a permanent colour. And the reason that T18 I think is very popular in America, in the US, or in the rest of the world, I think it's probably available in other countries as well, but it isn't here, is that it's a permanent colour, and it has a strong violet pigment to it. And that's why people love it, because it's got the power, it's got the energy and that power of the ammonia. It definitely has ammonia in it. And then you mix it with 20 volume peroxide, and then if their hair's not been lifted quite light enough, it has the power to shift the base very slightly. Now, I do think it's a great product. It is 20 volumes, so if you were to bleach your hair like I did, and like mine or my colleague did, you'll see that in a video coming up soon, then I wouldn't want to put 20 volume on my hair to tone it, because my scalp would be too sensitive, and I just don't need that much energy because I lifted my hair to a level 10, or almost a level 10. But you do see a lot of people that have put T18 on their hair, and this is no shade, but it looks very drab. It looks very kind of like unreflective. And that's because it has the ammonia, you mix it with a lot of peroxide, with a 20 volume peroxide, and that basically deposits a lot of pigment, so it can look, on a slightly deeper canvas, it can look very muddy. Now, the other exception is that sometimes I use Wella Illumina to tone. It's a beautiful product. I could make a video all about that on its own. If you would like that, let me know in the comments. I have got some beautiful pastel results with it, but my preference is always going to be to use a demi-permanent colour. And also just to add that sometimes, and I do see it a little bit on the tinterweb when I'm looking on social platforms, some people do lift hair to a certain point with a lightener, take it off, and then use a tint. But that's just not, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that is a way to do it, and that is it's a process. That's just not the process that I would choose. So when you're leaving comments or questions on my channel or my Instagram, and you want me to, give you my thoughts on using permanent colour as toner, that's exactly what they are. So let's have a little conclusion and an analogy for you. I wear on my face a tinted moisturiser a lot of the time because I don't want the coverage of a foundation. I want my natural skin to show through, and I don't want it to look like I'm wearing any makeup. Sometimes I might want it to look like I'm wearing makeup, but most of the time I don't. And that is a very good analogy for something like a permanent colour. It's very pigmented, but as we've already discussed, there's that energy in there, and you just don't need to use that amount of energy and that amount of pigment of deposit if you have lifted the hair to the right level when you are dealing with a global blonde or a partial highlight. And also, like I've already expressed earlier on, it's very, you've got to be very careful when you're dealing with partial lightening. If there's too much of an exchange of energy, you might shift the hair that has not been lifted, the natural hair. And then the client or yourself, you're gonna get a grow out, you're gonna get a regrowth. So, in a nutshell, if you don't need the energy of a permanent color and you've got the right amount of lift, then you don't need the energy of a permanent color. So we've come to the end of the video. I hope that was helpful. If it was, please let me know down below in the comments. I'm always open to suggestions. What other videos would you like to see here on my channel? I'm having a ball creating all of this content for all of you lovely peeps, and it really is fantastic when I get to engage with you in the comments. So thank you all very much for that. If you've come to the end of the video, thanks for that too. You'll take lots of care, and I'll see you all in the next one.